NACDL is the association of the nation's criminal defense bar.
But it is our pleasure today to talk to you about how to give snitches stitches. What you will see in the supporting materials that we have provided for you are some more detail, but this little 50-minute lecture, though we could go on for hours and hours and hours, right? But they kept us short, is to make sure you have some of the things we want you to keep in mind about how to handle this special type of witness and things in terms of how you present in the courtroom, okay?
So the Capitol Project in Massachusetts talked about what a snitch is, and they gave us sort of a good definition. Jailhouse informants comprise the most deceitful and deceptive group of witnesses known to frequent the courts. They rush to testify like vultures to rotting flesh or sharks to blood. They are smooth and convincing liars. Whether they seek favors from the authorities, attention, or notoriety, they are in every instance completely unreliable. They must be recognized as a very great danger to our trial system. And that was, like I said, the Massachusetts Capitol Project, who also told us that 45.9% of wrongful convictions, snitches account for those cases in capital cases. And so as you can see, obviously, snitches are a problem. What is a snitch? Carlos Gonzalez wrote an article for the ABA and talked again about what a snitch is. A snitch is a very special type of witness. He or she was arrested, accused of committing a crime, and offered a deal. The witness is not testifying out of moral obligation or because they're a good person. The testimony of the witness is a requirement, right, imposed by the government in exchange for a reduced sentence. Now, in law school, it was difficult for me to learn all this stuff, so I'm going to offer to you acronyms. And I have an acronym when we deal with snitches. Remember LAP. LAP like what? Like the snitch is in the lap of the government. L, snitch got locked up. A, they've been accused of a crime. And P, they've taken a plea or pled guilty to something in this case. So that's the first acronym of the day, LAP. Snitches in the lap of the government.
All right, so one of the other things that we want you to remember, right, is in order to deal with snitches, we like the acronym of PPP. Now, we have a bet, so you all better not let me down.
We're also going to show our age.
I wanted to sing something for you and see if you know what the recall
Let's see.
Yeah, because I can't see, so let's see how this goes. So instead of OPP, which is what the song says, we want you to remember PPP, right? It is plan, prepare, and then punish, right? That is what we are going to do with snitches. Because they carry such weight, because they are believed by jurors, we can't just wake up and decide, I'm going to cross the snitch today, right? It takes effort, and if you remember to plan, prepare, and then punish, we think you'll be successful. Well, let's hope. I don't know why it's not catching. Okay, there we go. So let's talk about what the planning looks like.
So first, right, before you get started, as you do almost in all of your cases, right, you're going to start with a brainstorm. Where is it that you're going? What is your theory of the case? And I've seen lawyers 5-6 years in the game who actually start their case and don't have an overarching theory. So our first thing is, right, decide where are you going? What is your theory of the case?
You also then want to develop a strategy, right? Again, you don't just wake up and decide to cross a snitch. You have to put the time in to think about strategically how that snitch is going to affect your case. This is where you decide the important things, right? A lot of times lawyers would come into my office and say, H, don't worry, we're going to win because there's a snitch. What does that mean, right? Was your client there or not? right? Was it important that your client was perhaps the follower following behind that snitch as opposed to being the leader, the way the government is putting it out there? So you have to strategize exactly who that snitch is going to be.
You know, this came into play where I had not only snitches, but I had to figure out what was my strategy because my client was on GPS at the time of the murder and the robbery.
Just
so
a little thing.
What is
Just
the strategy there?
No problem. Then you want to think about how it advances your theory, right? We don't cross if it does not advance our theory. Now, here's what we get. We are all trial lawyers. We love this work. We know that we can get in there and tear a witness up. But what is the point, right? If it is not advancing our theory, if it is not helping us get to that verdict of not guilty, we leave it alone. The same is with snitches. So if your theory is not being supported by an area of the cross with that snitch, it is our suggestion to leave it alone.
So what is the witness's purpose, right? Every witness in your case is going to have a purpose. How does the witness actually fit in to your theory of the case? What is the significance? And most importantly, how does the witness advance your case? I was dealing with a snitch most recently. And so even though you may have good facts that you think help you, if they're not advancing where you're going with your theory, that is that in this last case, the snitch was the cousin of my client. But I didn't really want to bring that out. That didn't go with my theory, right? That was not the way I was advancing the case. And so if you have information that when you're dealing with these witnesses, figure out how they fit into your case.
You have to answer the why are they snitching, right? The reality of it is jurors don't just think snitches are bad people anymore. Maybe that happened at some point. Brandi had a case where her snitch had admitted to killing 5 people. And afterwards, when we spoke to the jury was very clear about the fact that, yes, they spent an hour talking about how despicable that guy was, how they wouldn't want to meet him on the street, how they hated him. But they knew that they needed to separate that and figure out whether or not what he was saying was the truth, right? And why he would have been snitching. So you have to think about that and be able to answer for them at least a why as to why that person would do what they're doing.
Now, there are a lot of things that you want to keep in mind when you're dealing with a snitch, right? Who are they in their home life? All of this is going to matter, right, in terms of your cross-examination. Who are they in their work life? Who are they in their work life? What about their social lives? Social media, all of that stuff matters. In fact, we had a witness in this last case I just did where the witness denied knowing one of the co-defendants. The government got the Instagram page and they were sitting on a car together. So the same way the government uses that information against us, we can use it too, to establish relationships with other people that are involved in the case.
You want to think about who the snitch wants to impress. Who do they want to please, right? What is sort of their focus, right? How do they want to be perceived by everybody? Snitching, society-wise, music-wise, is not popular. So what is the motive that is driving this particular person to risk so much in order to be able to testify?
You know, one of the things that I have found that's really helpful in terms of dealing with a cooperator is to watch their videos. Now, of course, you're going to watch their videos no matter what. But it gives me a sense of how they are going to come across in the courtroom. And it really matters for me. I'm a Texan, as I shouted out the rest of the Texans in here earlier.
Go DC.
And so I'm aggressive. And so it matters, right? How is the witness going to come across? Are they going to come across as likable? Are they going to come across as somebody who, even though they're in custody and even though they're snitching, they're going to come across believable? If so, I want to know that before going in.
The planning is important because if we do it right, we end up knowing way more than the government does about their witness. It allows us to expose that witness and actually use that witness as a tool for us, right? The snitch doesn't have to be the be-all that ends all for the government. We can turn that person into sometimes our strongest weapon against their theory.
So now, this is another little acronym. It's not as easy to remember, but just keep in mind, right? What is going to be your theory of the snitch? And there's so many areas of cross-examination. There's so many different ways that you can go about dealing with a snitch. But I've got 4. Bias, motive, interest, and knowledge. And here is my acronym. KIMBY. KIMB. Now, it's backwards. It'll be knowledge, interest, motive, and bias. But again, I'm trying to get you guys a way to remember this stuff. We got LAP, we got PPP, and now we have KIMB. So again, these are 4 areas, 4 different ways in which you can decide what is going to be your theory of this snitch and how are you going to deal with them on cross-examination.
So we'll start first discussing
picture.
bias. That is like my favorite picture in life because I love Carlton and I think that's how all snitches look when they're planning to try to come for my
Probably.
client. So I love that, right? So we're going to start first with the area of bias, right? Okay, my clicker doesn't like me today. There we go. So you want to start first by thinking about, is there any personal bias between the snitch and your client? Right? Is there some prejudice in form of one group? Is there something about that snitch that doesn't like your client because they belong to a certain group, right? You want to figure out if you can figure out if they have any of that.
Do they have a history of disagreements, right? So again, this last snitch and my client, remember I told you they were cousins. I didn't want the jury to know, but my client had done an 8-year stint, so they weren't that close, right? And so they actually had beef growing up. Again, didn't want the jury to know my client had done 8 years, but if there's a history of disagreements, you want to decide what's going to advance your theory of the case, right? Again, earlier I was telling you, even though they're the cousin, and there was that bias, I didn't want to bring that out. I actually wanted to bring out the history of disagreements that they had over the years that they were actually cool.
And it can extend not just to the client, but to the friends and the family, right? How many snitches have had connections, not so much that they per se hate the client, but they hate maybe the client's brother or the client's baby mother or their auntie or somebody that's related sort of in that family. Those are the type of relationships that you need to be paying attention for to decide if there's something you can highlight in relating to bias.
This is my favorite picture of the
loved
slide.
that slide.
I would just ask you guys as closely as you can to look at this photo because really, I don't even know why this photo exists on the internet. So it's a car. The tag on the back says snitch. There's a police officer over here on the side who's got his thumb up. And then there's a guy with, as you can see, 2 ladies with their feet hanging out. He's got a machine gun in the back. It looks like he's a dead body. I mean, what is the skull?
Allegedly.
And again, why is this picture out there on the internet? Because again, the relationships that snitches have with police officers are real. And I think they let them do things like get away with things other people wouldn't get away with. And so you want to try to see if you have any information, if the police officer has worked with the snitch before, if he's given him anything. Heather one time had a real live snitch who they allowed to leave custody and go see his baby be born at the hospital. Now, that wasn't written down in any plea agreement. Nobody knew about that. But again, if somebody had done a proper inquiry, the prosecutor probably would have turned that information over. So whatever you can find out about these relationships, it can certainly help advance your cross.
We end up finding pictures of them with him and the baby. It was cute. Okay. All right. There's also the gang issue, right? We can't escape it. A lot of times in our federal court cases, they are coming out to different gangs got real serious beefs against one another. And it could be that this is retaliation from the gang and the snitch is playing his part in relation to that. So you want to look for those things.
Now we're just going to talk about, right, one of the other areas, which is motive. Like, what is the snitch's motive? Again, there's all these things that we know about, but what is the jury going to be, looking for? So motive is one of the things.
Nope, I'm going to play the song.
I'm steady trying to find the motive.
There you go. Song has been played. So again, we're just trying to figure out what is the snitch's motive and how can you expose that for purposes of your cross?
Sometimes people just want revenge, right? That person may have killed someone in that person's crew. That person may have disrespected them at some yard or function years ago and there's beef because of it. Sometimes it's you've ended up with somebody that I liked that didn't want to be with me, right? It can be just as pure and simple as revenge. My favorite are when it's like the girlfriend who's also mad because the guy broke up with her and doesn't want to be with her anymore, right? So you want to look and see if there's any motive related to revenge.
And this is all just a part of your plan, right? You just want to figure this out before you get started actually preparing the cross. Are there threats being made by the government to the snitch's family? That happens a lot, right? Are they going to bring additional charges? Are they willing to drop charges? Is the mom involved? Is the mom going to get out of trouble? Have they made any promises not to prosecute someone, right? The girlfriend gets caught with drugs. The snitch comes and testifies that your client knows about it because they've agreed not to prosecute the snitch's girlfriend. So again, trying to find those avenues that will help you figure out what steps you can take to make the best cross. Immigration status.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we know in this day and time, we probably can't turn on the TV without hearing about immigration and things going on in this country. The threat of deportation is realer, I think, now than it's been in any of the 20 years since we've been doing it, right? That is a motivator for people. If that connection can be that if I snitch, you will not deport me or my family, especially if that particular family has literally lived there probably all of their life. Perhaps they're just not paper legal citizens, right? That can be a motivator. You want to make sure you're asking about those particular relationships.
One thing I want to tell you about deportation, I want everybody, when you're dealing with a snitch, I'm sure you do this already, but it really helped me in my last case. Keep in mind what the government does for you when you have a snitch. I know none of you represent snitches, and we don't tell people in public that we do
Keep that to yourself.
So I understand. I get it. But if you did ever have a snitch, and you know how the government interacts with you when you have a snitch, keep that in mind for your cross. I have a guy right now who's facing deportation, and the FBI agent said specifically, we will get you a temporary work visa as long as you cooperate. Now, I didn't know that a temporary work visa was a real thing until I heard about this particular, this FBI agent brought it up to me. I just have to keep in mind when I'm dealing with the cross, what are the things the government's willing to give me when I'm on the other side of the table? And those things can be really helpful for your cross as well.
Sometimes it can just be fear and pressure, right? The reality of it is a lot of people don't want to do jail time. So they are like, anything that I have to do to get away from that, I will do. If it means put your client, his mama, whoever into it, that is what we'll do. Sometimes it's just also pressure. They feel like everything relating to their case is so bad that there'll never be a way that they get out of it. So that pressure prompts them to crack and ends up becoming a snitch. I don't know why it doesn't like me. There we go.
So also, again, this is the I in Kimby. What is the snitch's interest? I was shocked. I mean, I know you guys know, but I was shocked to know that they give cash payments. I mean, literally, I just didn't know that. Sometimes they used to give these little credit cards, these little debit cards. You can go and get your witness fee. But I had a not really a snitch, but sort of a snitch, that the government just gave what they called emergency sustenance payments to. They locked the person up, forced him to come testify, put him in emergency housing, and then gave him $150 in emergency sustenance pay. So again, what is the witness's interest in the case? Why are they now there to testify?
They love the immunity, right? That get out of jail free card for them. That I can admit to doing any and everything that I want to the government, and it's not gonna matter, you're gonna let me out, right? You'll be amazed how many snitches in their time of being snitches know that there's certain things that they're never even gonna get held for, right? If I get caught with a little bit of drugs, that's not a big issue. If I don't really check in like I'm supposed to, that's not a big issue, right?
If I lie to Congress, not that big.
We know that that is not a big issue apparently anymore. That is what's happening in D.C. So, right, that's one of the things.
Get out of jail free cards are something that seriously government prosecutors give immunity letters as to us, right? Even when we're dealing with a witness, they give them out all the time. And so that's a real thing.
Right? Pre-trial bail release. People want to be on the street. There are many times at certain cases you just feel like they're at automatic hold. A lot of times that's when I realize the person is snitching because that person has been PR'd and is out on something that I know either the bail would have been high or they just wouldn't have been released. Right?
Armed home invasion. Had a guy charged with an armed home invasion, armed robbery. The government, because he was snitching in this murder, let him out on pretrial release. He had no conditions whatsoever. So again, pretrial release promises will really be fodder for your cross-examination.
And whatever their expected benefit is in their case, right? They'll take a few misdemeanors if they have to. They might even take a small felony. But if you just got to take maybe a small felony relating to somebody else's conspiracy case that's going to carry mandatory time or anything like that, they're willing to do it in order to be a snitch. So you want to make sure that you're looking out for that.
So like I was telling you earlier about those informal agreements, you just want to try to see if you can at least ask the prosecutor whether there are formal and informal agreements. Now, a lot of times you may not get them. Let's assume for whatever reason the government doesn't turn it over. At least you have an issue on appeal, right? I mean, so you want to ask for all formal and informal agreements. Presumably you'll get them. If you get them, obviously they're good for your cross-examination.
There are some suggestions in the written materials also about how to lock the government in with that, right? We like to ask the question. I want you on the record denying, so that when it starts to come out, when you end up having to turn all of this stuff over, and the judge is like, but she definitely asked you about this 6 months ago when this case started, there's no confusion. In the letter, you will see, I say, even if you might not have made it, I want you to find out from the other AUSAs in your office and from your officers that are involved in the case. Brandi's last murder, after she did that, we got a ton of text messages between the police officers and the snitch in the case, begging them to come to court, telling them, you know, we'll hook you up. You know, we've got your back if you just do right by us, right? Because she asked the question, they then felt obligated to say, maybe we should go look so that we don't get embarrassed and get busted with that, right? And then it got exposed. So you want to start thinking about these ways of also to trap them in.
So, I mean, again, think about that, right? I really can't even imagine, other than my roster letter, what would make the prosecutor turn it over? These are text messages from the prosecutor to the witness, telling the witness to come to court. Maybe they're just so worried that the witness is going to say it on the stand. So ask for anything that you can think of in your discovery requests.
Right? There's the major 5K game, right? This idea that in the feds, no matter what you might have caught as a sentence, if you cooperate, if you do right, you can be walking straight back out the front door. These snitches are not ignorant to that. When you meet them a lot of times or see their interviews, if they're in federal court, you will hear them bring it up to the prosecutor. Do you think I could get this cooperator deal, that hookup deal, you know, that safety valve kind of situation, right? Because they've been around and they know that it exists. No different on the state side either, right? These guys know these deals exist, and so you want to be looking after them.
And anybody who ever had a federal cooperator, even though I know that's nobody in the room, if you have a federal cooperator and you've had a 5K before, I had a guy that was facing mandatory 10 and he got probation. So again, this stuff is really good fodder for your cross. If you just sort of reverse, if you were on the other side of it, how would it help you in dealing with your client, not the snitch?
You want to think about pending cases elsewhere, not just in the jurisdiction perhaps where your case is in that moment, and probation revocations, right? A lot of people have a lot of backup time that is hanging over their head. It might be that perhaps their role in this snitch situation might not be that big, but they're doing it because what's coming in another situation is bad for them, right? You'll see in the written materials, we talk about getting those jackets and those probation files to see what those revocation periods are. In federal court, you end up a lot of times having to go back and see that a judge in relation to your supervised release, right? Which is a big deal. And so you want to make sure for the snitches that you know whether or not that's happening.
Asset forfeiture is obviously a big thing when you're in federal court as well. Again, just think about those things for cross-examination. If you can show that a snitch has an interest in retaining, let's say there's a big drug sales and they have bought lots of property that has not actually been seized yet. They have a interest in retaining that information. Those are things you want to cross-examine about. Again, it wasn't something that was a bright line rule for me or something that I thought about that much until I had cooperators that were cooperating in federal cases and the government was willing to forego doing asset forfeiture.
We talked about cash payments.
Cash payments, we did talk about that. Again, I don't know how in your different jurisdictions it's going to come out. It's certainly something that you want to check, find out if you can ask for it, find out if the government's turning it over automatically. And one of the things that I find to be really big in dealing with the snitch, we all have clients that call us all the time about things that are going wrong when they're locked up, right? All kinds of problems at the prison. So if snitches can get special accommodations when they are in jail, that really matters. And again, I don't think a jury really understands it the way that we do, right? You're going to be housed in a different location. You're going to have access to your commissary more often than other folks. This last cross I was doing was talking about you actually get to take more showers at that jail than you do at the other jail. Now, again, the jury doesn't even really know that, right? They just, I don't know, what do they think about when guys take showers? But if you're taking showers twice a week versus taking showers 7 days a week, that's really going to matter. That's an interest that the snitch will have in the case. And again, good fodder for cross-examination.
So, like Brandi was saying, the amenities in relation to literally things like snacks and ability to get to commissary feel small and insignificant to us, right? But the reality of what this jury needs to understand is what is motivating that person. And while we might all be able to go out and get whatever we want to eat whenever we feel like it, that's not the way prison works. So when you start to notice that somebody has had a whole bunch of money being able to be kept in their commissary, right? There's normally some numbers, they can't have so much, they got a whole bunch of money, everybody's getting food, they having a whole bunch of rec. We found that people were having extra visits. In DC, we have separate jails where you can have contact visits versus you have to see people behind the glass. The snitches figured out a way to get themselves over to the contact visit side, right? They can actually hug their loved ones, actually touch their babies, right? You have to make whatever motivates that snitch real for the jury to understand, and those are some of the things you want to look for. It doesn't like me. There it is. The next is knowledge, right? That's something that you want to see and know if you can find out and exploit to figure out why these people are participating. What type of snitches are kind of the best? The ones that have snitched before. Because they know the process, right? They know and expect how it goes. And most of the time, it's worked out well for them. So their incentive and knowledge of knowing if I play this game, if I do it this way, I will get this benefit is out there. So you want to look and see if they have any knowledge of how it goes.
Sometimes you've just got people that are involved in crime and they just understand the game, right? I mean, when you have, the government in this last case used this snitch 6 times, 3 times in the grand jury and at 3 separate trials. I mean, again, that is something that you can really illuminate for the jury. Again, it's all about getting this stuff out for cross-examination so that you can get nuggets for your closing, but a jury really just doesn't understand the significance of going into 3 grand jury proceedings, raising your hand, swearing to tell the truth, but having a different version from what you're saying now, and then also testifying at trials to try to get other people in trouble. That is that snitch's interest in the case, and if you have it, their knowledge base. If you have other transcripts of prior snitching, those are things that you certainly would want to use in your cross.
You want to figure out when they decided to snitch, right? Was it the very first day that they got locked up? Or was it 6 months down the road after 4 status hearings and being told by the government that they're not going to get a plea offer in their case unless they flip? Right? Or was it after they've been in the jail for a few months and there are 5 calls between them and their significant other at home saying, I'm pregnant and this baby is coming, what are you going to do? Right? So you want to look at the timing. That adds into their knowledge and things that you can highlight for a jury as to why they're snitching at the time that they are. See, I don't know.
Is that how they're feeling?
I'll figure this out by the next time.
Right? They're locked up. They won't let me out. I mean, I'm telling you, right? These are the kinds of things you want to get across to your jury because, again, that, to us, to criminal defense lawyers, all of our clients are locked up except the ones that we set free. But otherwise, we've got lots of clients that are in jail. And I think for a cross-examination, for a jury, one of the things that's really helpful to them is to understand the mentality of somebody who doesn't decide to become a snitch until they've been locked up.
So you want to pay attention to the sources of where they're saying they're getting the facts from, right? Are they saying, oh, I'm getting it because I was right there beside your client when they did A, B, and C? Or are they saying it's because I was his cellie for 2 months and while we were cellies, he confessed his entire life to me, right? Is it because I get letters from him and he's telling me everything that's going on outside? You want to pay attention to where the sources of the information are coming from, and as we have in the written materials, there are specific questions that you can ask the government government to try to get to that, right? Did the snitch write you a letter? In DC, we have this like Sandra Levy case years ago that was kind of going the city crazy. Everybody thought the congressman had killed her, whatever. And then like down the road, there's a snitch who miraculously says that the client had confessed to him, and it was just because they just loved each other and he was just sharing and they wanted to be open. Guy gets convicted. Later on, they found out that that snitch had started writing letters to the government saying, what can I do to start getting you some information? I realized this guy is my cellie. Is there something that I can do? The government had not turned over those letters. And for the defense, right, they were like, we didn't know to ask about those. Who knew? Because government was putting it as though, no, guy came through with the goodness of his heart. So we started adding a line. If you received any correspondence from the snitch, right, who reached out to the snitch first in order for you all to talk?
So this is a nice little quote. Failure to prepare is preparing to fail. Right? I mean, I just feel like there's no substitution for preparation. So now this takes us into the second P of our PPP, and we're dealing with how to prepare for your cross.
Sorry.
So the one thing you want to do, right, no matter what, and again, the reason I'm telling you this is because I just saw it happen last week. You got to know everything about your case. We should know the case better than anybody in the courtroom. Hopefully you guys already do that, but that means know all the facts, all the witnesses, every statement there is. And now, hopefully in your jurisdictions, you have body-worn camera, right? Like, we love it, except there's tons of it. There is so much of it. And sometimes you're like, this don't even have the client on it. I'm not trying to watch this. Like, for what? What is this gonna help me do? There are gems in those body-worn camera clips. I heard a police officer talking so much trash about a client of mine in the clip where the client was already locked up that I was able to cross him about it, and it went along with my plant theory. So again, you gotta know every single thing that there is in the case.
You want to gather all their inconsistent statements. In the planning phase, you thought about all the possibilities that could exist, where their knowledge might have came from, where their interest in this came from. That means you need to start pulling all of that stuff together. Most of that stuff somewhere is paper, and I mean paper in like, I know we're all electronic these days, right? But actual something that you can pull. Those cooperation agreements, paper. Those probation agreements, paper. Their assets, paper, right? So you want to start bringing all of that in together and gather them toward the inconsistent statements.
So that just means use everything you got, every statement that you have. Words have power. I actually forced the judge. I didn't force the judge to do anything, but I asked the judge, in this case where we had a snitch, the snitch, I told you, he had done an armed home invasion and had gotten released by the government. The government, in their sentencing memoranda, in the lawyer's sentencing memoranda, he had said, the client wrote a letter to the judge that the government, of course, hadn't turned over. And then throughout the trial, they just kept saying, oh, we can't get our hands on it like it's in the other judge's file. We don't have a copy of what they gave the judge. Yeah, well, I was like, well, judge, you have access to the other judge. Can you call him up and ask him to give it to me? And it was awesome. What the guy had said, he had taken some of it back. He hadn't really done it all. It was really the friends, except he had actually pled to all of the conduct. So that letter, again, was something that I wouldn't have otherwise known about, but I was able to show inconsistent statements for purposes of the cross.
You also want to look at how their statements compare to things that are provided by other witnesses and other evidence, right? At the time when snitches give these statements, they haven't had the opportunity to look perhaps at like where the gunshots are and where the residue and things are going to be. So you'll be amazed that once they've gotten stuck in that story, they'll be like, no, he absolutely was shot on the left side, right? Well, how great is it that once you're able to get that out of him, you have real things from perhaps the medical evidence or someone else to impeach him with, right? So you want to find the things in other witnesses and evidence that can be used to impeach him.
If you've got reputation or opinion evidence, again, like we're just the lawyers, right? We can investigate the case, but these folks, they know each other sometimes, right? If you've got snitches involved in a case, usually the snitch is somehow gonna claim that they're related to your client, not necessarily by blood, but that they know them from growing up, they know them from the neighborhood, they know them from the jail cells, whatever it is. you can find out both reputation and opinion evidence about him. And again, these are good areas for cross.
My favorite is that we've gotten medical records from the snitch while he's been at the jail. And in interviewing with like the nurses and things, they were writing, he's the most dishonest dude on this wing, right? He keeps just making up stuff because he wants to get in his own cell. He's faking that he has mental health issues, right? I didn't say it, these people said it, right? And so we were able to litigate that. The judge was like, I think she can get it in, right? And so it's great to be like, and you make up stuff at the jail just again. He was like, maybe. Yeah, well, you did. So
opinion evidence, same kind of thing.
Same kind of thing, right? If you can find that and use it, all of this stuff, which is why we talk about the plan and prepare stage. Again, you don't wake up and figure this out, right? As you're investigating, as you're finding out these pieces, you're trying to figure out, is there a way that I can use this stuff?
All I do is win, no matter
People
what.
say we like music, right? Right. So the third P, right? The one that we love, the one that as all defense attorneys we come into the courtroom ready to do is the punishment phase, right? After I have planned all of this out, after I've prepared by getting all of the evidence, how do I put it together in order to punish you, witness, and prove to my jury that they should listen to what I'm saying and not what the government is saying?
And what punishment means for purposes of cross-examination with a snitch, it really just means impeachment, right? There are going to be so many different avenues of impeachment. And I'm not just talking about inconsistent statements. There's all kinds of ways to cast doubt on the witness's credibility. And that's what the punishment part of this is. That's what we're going to be doing when it comes to the punishment. And so the impeachment material, what are the sources of the impeachment material? There are so many, right? And so we're just going to go through a few. You've got criminal records, you've got public records, you've got private records, you've got medical records, you've got housing records, all kinds of stuff which could be fodder for your cross-examination.
And you definitely want to try to investigate them as much as you can, right? You could talk to neighbors, you could talk to any particular officers maybe in their neighborhood who might tell you something, right? You'd be surprised, especially for a lot of snitches. Sometimes they're not well liked by many people, right? And so people are like, I will tell you everything you want to know about how he's a liar and how he like makes up things or whatever. So you want to make sure that you're out there investigating and getting a lot
Can
of
you
it.
do me a favor right quick? Can you raise your hand if you do not have social media?
Only you.
No, it's somebody in here with me. Somebody is in here with me. Okay, so look.
Just you.
I'm just telling you guys, right? Out of all these folks in here, there's probably 5 of us that don't have social media. I am telling you, it is the best fodder for cross-examination. People put their entire, I don't know why, take them
it's
down.
fun.
I cyber stalk people. I watch you. I see what you're doing. I'm telling you, witnesses, they give up the best information on social media. So, I mean, again, that's one of the best places where you can investigate the snitch and find out what kind of things they're into. Honestly, you know, the government a lot of times gets these pictures of our clients with guns, and then they turn them into the judge, and then their clients get locked up. The snitches have those same things too. They have those same things on their social media, so use that as much as you can.
I just want to make sure. All right, you're gonna pull prior convictions, right? The rules allow us to use those. You're also gonna pull things like the federal court cases, any witness and victim inquiry things, right? Some of these snitches have been complainants in other cases. It's interesting to see the type of things that they accuse other people of, so you could get that. You wanna have the actual transcripts of the prior testimony and the details and the sentencing memorandums, right? You'd be amazed how the government will paint some of these snitches in their sentencing memoranda about the number of cases that he's aided the government in and been successful in leading to convictions, right? So I want those.
Sorry about that.
No.
Sentencing memoranda really, really matters because, again, remember, right, when we're crossing these guys, it's all about what's in their mind. So, I mean, you wanted the government to write you another one of these letters, right? Like the last glowing one that Rebecca Smith wrote for you in your case. And what she said that time was, he is great. I mean, you're looking for another one of those letters, right? So those memoranda that the government write, those are really helpful for your cross.
Don't be traumatized or trapped by the 10-year window. Sometimes people say I'm cut off by that. Sometimes if you can figure out under the rule how it pertains to credibility, you can extend that window, right? And so it's even better for us as snitches. Sometimes the government thinks, oh, he's only got this 1 or 2 convictions in the last year. Nope, we're opening up the door and bringing everything in if we can relate it to credibility.
Other crimes evidence, right? Sometimes judges will just let you get into it. Again, it's all about what the snitch is trying to avoid. And so if those charges could be brought, again, statute of limitations is not up. Those are other things that you can use in your cross too, outside of just convictions, also other crimes evidence.
And same as any protections that they give them for future crimes, right? If they are still allowing people to be out here still pushing kilos of cocaine after they've already been snitched on, right? Snitched, it's kind of like, wait, what is going on? What protections do you have? Is there sort of this informal agreement with the government? It's like, he did his part, we're going to turn away and not pay attention to what he's doing, and you can bring that out.
So personal problems, it's really crazy, right? Are the snitches dealing with some personal problems at the time of the trial or either at the time of the offense? Again, for us, it's been really helpful to get these jail medical records. Now, again, you're gonna need a subpoena, right? You're gonna have to make some showing of why you can get it, but usually a judge is gonna turn it over. Heather had a guy who was she talked about one of them, who was on the medical unit actually making up reasons to get out of the medical unit. So again, you went there, you checked in, and then the nurses there were like, every time we have him in this area where he's supposed to be, he clogs up the toilet so that he has to get out of the unit. Again, things that just show a lack of credibility that you can use for your cross. Really, sometimes you find really good stuff in these medical records. Public records, the same kind of thing. You find good stuff. Lawsuits, landlord-tenant matters. Again, things that go to the witness's credibility. Now, you're not going to just be able to talk about the fact that the snitch got evicted. But I mean, if there are statements in there that show a lack of trustworthiness, a lack of credibility, you will be able to use those statements.
I love when they're like, he's getting evicted of some place that he said he never lived, right? And it's like, well, here's something that says that. Okay. DMV records, admin records, freedom of information rights. What we really just want you guys to start thinking of, it's not just those few pieces of the cooperation agreement that the government hands you that is your universe, right? They want that to be a universe. We're not going with that. You have to open your mind and start thinking of other ways that you can attack and find things to get at these snitches. There's just some lists of them, of private records. We talked about medicals, we talked about housing, military service records, drug abuse records and treatment, right, are interesting. Is this person just continuing to use without sanctions while they're trying to be a snitch for the government and the government's not doing anything about that?
Any evidence that you have, and again, sometimes it's minor stuff. Any evidence that you have about the snitch being untruthful, it does not have to be involved in your case. So anything that you have, any records that you can uncover that show a lack of trustworthiness or untruthfulness are, again, good areas for cross. So this is one that I think, I don't know, Heather and I sort of decided, we're gonna like make this a thing. All of us and all of you have clients who don't show back up to court, right? They do failure to appear. We call them BRAs in DC. So we have those kinds of cases. And we also have clients, right, who are on probation and somehow violate. Everybody has that. So when you're crossing a snitch, usually they have been in some kind of trouble like that. Not necessarily they failed to appear, but I mean, if they're in this situation, there's been some broken promise to a judge somewhere along the line. Cross on that. So you were before the judge, you told him that you were gonna come back. Specifically, you wrote your name at the bottom of a piece of paper, and on your word, they let you out. And then you didn't come back. Right? Do whatever you can to use the stuff that's in the snitch's criminal file, probation file, whatever you can use for your cross to establish a lack of credibility.
When judges put our clients on probation and they read the terms of it, they say, sir, do you accept these terms of probation? And the client then has to say, yes, I do, right? You have given someone your word about what you are going to do, and you failed with that, right? And so those are things that you can sort of use to show this is somebody who doesn't keep their word. All right. So
here are the most important things to this lecture, right? And so we're going to give you some tips on how to do the cross. I've given you several acronyms: LAC, locked up, accused of a crime, pled guilty. PPP, plan and prepare for the punishment. Now we're going to give you this list. The first thing that lots of lawyers have told me specifically, but probably told everybody, when you are dealing with a snitch, can you not be an ogre? Can you not be so overwhelming that the jury doesn't like you? right? I mean, we always come into thinking that snitches are such bad people that the jury's just gonna walk away and dislike them as people, and that's just not what's gonna happen. So first and foremost, check your attitude.
You want to think about how you start and how you end, right? The government has their same little cookie cutter way that they always do their directs. But we are storytellers, right? I don't mean story in terms of fables, we made something up. We tell our client's story of innocence through every witness that we put on. There should be no difference in that when it is time for a snitch. So maybe we don't start with, sir, we know that you're facing X number of years in prison. That's cool, but is that the best way to get into the story? Maybe we want to start with how many times he's lied to the government before he got their story right. Maybe we want to talk about the fact that he has a baby on the way, and after when he found that out is when he started snitching, and then get into the other visuals. So you want to think importantly about how to start and how to finish. And I know you all had the amazing Mr. Posner yesterday. So chapters, right? Chapters are effective for that because it can help you after you prepare your cross, move them into an order that moves sort of the listener.
All right, next.
Doesn't like me. There we go.
Obviously, right?
I know he said this 9 million times yesterday, right?
Leading questions only. Control the witness. Don't give up control. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. You guys have all seen it. People just ask open-ended questions, and I'm not really sure why lawyers think that they're going to be effective. With a snitch is going to attempt to control you. Don't forget, they're from the streets in terms of knowing this case. They are somehow involved in criminal activity. They see us as just the lawyer. So if you get into a situation with a snitch and you start asking open-ended questions, you are going to find yourself with a bad answer.
Short and sweet. 1 fact per question. I know you're like, I got this though, H. I'm just going to get them. Nobody can follow along if you are lumping too many concepts in together, right? Good stories come in chapters and pieces, and there's no different for the purposes of the crowds. So 1 fact per question.
Be visual with your words. And so try to paint a picture. We all have it in our mind how bad things are. Jurors don't always know that. There's a big difference between, sir, you don't want to do 15 years in prison, right? A jury hears that, they're like, yeah, okay, whatever. When you are released, your daughter will be an adult, and she's only 5 now, right? That paints a whole different picture for the jury. So again, even though we know it, you want to be visual with your words.
You want to prepare for the objections, right? You know how it is when you're on a roll, it's going good, the government realizes it's going good, and they start objecting or saying, Judge, we don't think she can get into that, that's not okay. You know your jurisdictions, right? There are some judges that if that happens, they're so into whatever the cross is, they like, just let her go, it's fine, just let her go, right? That's like 3 judges, right? But then the others who are like, yeah, why do you think you can cross in that? Where are you getting this from? Where is this happening? You can make the strategic decision if that's something you want to bring up early because you don't want them to get in your way, or maybe strategically like, stop me in the middle of this cross so I can shame you about the fact that I have this and you're gonna let me get in it. I leave that to you as grown-ups to figure out what works best in your jurisdictions, but be ready, right? If there's case law that you are going to need, have that ready. If there's a document that you're going to be using and that needs to be turned over, have that ready so that when it pops off, it's not a big issue for you. Okay.
Use visual aids if you can. I actually, for the first time, used a PowerPoint in the cross. It was kind of fun. You got to get to court about an hour early, though, to make sure it works.
It's
really
true.
fun. I mean, like, you're, like, clicking through, especially if there's, again, in D.C., we've got every police officer, allegedly, has a body-worn camera. And so if you can, like, click through that while you're cross-examining, it really is much more effective. Again, if you've got videos of your snitch, they've given some videotape statement to the police, clipping that into little portions and using it in a PowerPoint, I'm going to tell you, it was super, super effective. And I think it certainly helped jurors understand where I was coming from in terms of the snitch.
I've even seen some lawyers just use a plain whiteboard, and as they are talking about the number of years for whatever the snitch is facing, just write those numbers up, right? And then silently come back after another section and write those up. So by the end, when you're adding them up, I'm going to tell you my problem with that is I don't do math.
I can't
So
math.
I would not have been able to add those numbers up.
No, that's
but
not gonna work for
whatever
me.
works
But if
for
it
you,
works for
make
you.
sure that happens. right.
Transition phrases,
yeah.
right? And I think this really matters because we know so much about these cooperators and we think the jury's gonna know. But you wanna take this slow when you're dealing with the plea agreement. You wanna start with using some kind of transition. You don't have to use ours, but you wanna make sure that you're making this clear, a headline or a transition for the snitch. And one of the ways you can do that is by saying, now I wanna talk to you about this plea agreement. Or I want to talk to you about this plea deal, right? And then define what deal means to the snitch. Whatever it is, you just want to use a transition phrase when you start to deal with the agreement so that your jury is not lost.
And then you're going to always do your impeaches, right? That's the Kimbe, right?
Kimbe.
Kimbe.
K-I-M-B.
Knowledge, the interest, the motive, and the bias, right? When you have those are the things that you're going to use to cross and have those actual documents ready. And lastly, she hates this slide.
Who are these people?
Love it.
All I do is
Wait, back, wait, no, because they're going to watch Arya.
That's what's going to happen, right? The last point, because I'm a Game of Thrones fiend and I love it, right, is we really just want to remind you to be the most prepared in the courtroom, right? If you watch Game of Thrones, you knew Arya, she's having a little bit difficult in the beginning of the battle, right? She had to get through that. She had to just get her confidence back up because what do we say to the Lord of Death? Not today. And then she went through,
Lost.
right? And
I
did
am
what she
just
needed.
lost.
So we just really want to remind you to be the most prepared, be the strongest, and be an amazing advocate when you're there in the courtroom. All right?